If you're watching this video, it's probably because you grew up with the Lunar games, or at least are nostalgic for them. So of course you want to know if the recent remasters are worth playing. I'll be briefly reviewing each game, focusing on these new versions to let you know if I think they're okay. Both were initially developed for the Sega CD, localized by infamous company Working Designs. Those guys always did a great job with the localization in terms of physical releases, but took some liberties altering difficulty and adding silly jokes to the translations. Well, both got a full remake on the Sega Saturn only in Japan, but also on the PlayStation. We did get those versions, also localized by Working Designs. This will mark the last time we will see any release of Lunar 2 Eternal Blue, until this remaster of course, because the first one went on to be remade a million times with releases on Windows, Game Boy Advance, PSP, iOS, Android, and well, today, finally with its sequel in these remasters. Switch, PS4, PS5, Steam. You need to know that these remasters are based on the PlayStation versions and the Working Designs translation. I'll be reviewing the Nintendo Switch versions, keep that in mind. You already know the first Lunar is about Alex wanting to become a Dragon Master like his hero before him, so he starts a quest with his two best friends until eventually he finds out everyone seems interested in Luna. A good story, nothing outstanding, but back then it was full of charm. The same charm that the English dub in the Working Designs version have. It was bad, of course, with cheesy songs and all, but it was charming, as I said, and a lot of people are nostalgic for it. Well, all of that went away with this remaster. None of the original cast returned, and they were all replaced with modern actors. You know, professional and very talented actors. Well, it isn't bad, but it isn't great either. Thankfully, you can change the voiceovers to Japanese, and I strongly suggest you do that for both games. Now, as I mentioned before, the remasters are based on the original Working Designs translations. They could have retranslated the games to be more faithful to the original Japanese scripts, like Konami allegedly did with the Suikoden remasters, but nope, they didn't even bother. The large majority of the silly jokes and clunky dialogue are still present, you'd be surprised. Unfortunately, there is some modern censorship for some of them, or some of the wording of the original translators used. This right here is a perfect example on how Gung Ho, the publisher of these remasters, gave priority to snowflakes. So overall, I don't even know what to say about this. I'm disappointed that they didn't retranslate the games faithfully to the original Japanese script, but I'm also disappointed they censored the silly Working Designs version. I guess I should say it's both lazy and stupid. The graphics have been reworked beautifully in some areas and horribly in others, upscaled to 1080p resolution for the pixels, and strangely only some of the backgrounds. Others still look like the PlayStation 1 versions with barely any work done to them. There's even some blur in the upper part of the screen and below, even though it's barely noticeable. Sadly, the frame rate isn't at 60 frames per second, especially not in the Switch version. There's constant frame drops in some areas with the scrolling in anime cutscenes, but also in the game when they're showcasing a certain place or when you're walking around in some areas. I didn't notice anything in battle though. The Silver Star is a turn-based RPG where your characters always start on the right side of the screen and the enemies on the left. However, when anybody attacks, especially in close combat, they move towards their target and stay there. So if a target is far away, they'll just advance a bit and do nothing. It's all about planning different strategies on which enemy to attack first and what skills or magic to use. Again, this combat is nothing special nowadays, feeling in fact very generic and slow, but back then, trust me, it was a bit innovative. The remaster offers a speed up option by 2 or 3 times for any battle, which is a great quality of life addition. Also included is an auto battle feature, but the AI is a mixed bag. It makes intelligent decisions most of the time, but yeah, every now and then it gets you killed. Never use this feature for boss fights. The difficulty has been rebalanced, thankfully. Original Sega CD versions were legendary for some spikes, and the PS1 version still carried some insanity over. I mean, these remasters are still a bit challenging, but not as convoluted as the originals. However, There are no difficulty settings for either game. Music is still the same and it sounds decent enough for modern TVs or computers, mainly composed by Noriyuki Iwadare, with the same memorable themes returning. The exploration in this game has always been very traditional, as in you visit towns, areas and dungeons with an overworld in between. The PS1 version had random encounters in the overworld, but guess what? In this remaster, they're completely gone. Some of you will hate that, I know. Me, I'm actually thankful. Never been a fan of random encounters, not even when growing up. Inside areas or dungeons though, you can see the enemies around, sometimes easy to avoid, sometimes hard. But the loading screens for everything are super fast in the remaster, and with the speed up feature, you'll be in and out of battle in no time. The menus have a new UI and interface that I found confusing, especially for the equipment system. I'm not sure why they couldn't arrange this in a more traditional way, instead leaving a contrived version. You eventually get used to it, of course. Finally, you can save anywhere you want, including inside the dungeons at any given time. That's it for the first Lunar, let's move on to the second one. This is 1000 years after the first game. Some references to it are there throughout the story, but it isn't necessary to play the Silver Star first. Jump straight into this one if you want to. It follows Lucia, who has been recently awakened by spoiler events, escaping the place she was living in. Then we move to Hiro, a young boy living with his adopting grandfather and his mascot. Well, who gets offended if you call it a mascot? It's a flying cat. Anyway, Hiro wants to be an adventurer and of course meets Lucia at some point, and well, yeah, you know, the story goes on from there. I like the plot of this game a lot more than the first one, because it involves more dark and mature themes. The translation by Working Designs is also present in the remaster, and everything I said about the first one also applies here. Most of it was left intact, but some jokes or words were censored. No censorship, however, was applied to Lucia's nudity during the intro. Only the Sega CD version remains censored, since the remaster is based on the PS1 version and stayed intact. Well, it's not like there was ever anything explicit in the first place to censor anyway. Going back to the story, I also suggest you use the Japanese dub over the modernized, boring and charmless new English dub. As for the graphics, we have the exact same problem as with the first game. Frame drop issues during some of the cutscenes where the camera is moving up or down, same in some of the areas where you explore around with your character, and the same blurry effect in the upper and lower parts of the screen is also here, barely noticeable if you don't pay enough attention. So for both games, the remaster is lazy in the graphical department, but the technical issues aren't that big of an issue, to be honest. Music stays intact, thankfully, with more refined audio. However, both versions sound a bit lower than they should, or so I noticed. The battle system in Lunar 2 is also turn-based, actually identical in terms of everything, but one fatal flaw is that the icon for auto battle or manual battle are switched here. They were opposites in the first game. What the hell, Gung-Ho? Both games have this new menu interface and UI that is meh. I didn't care for it, but I didn't hate it. At least the sequel wasn't as confusing as in the first game, so that was a plus. Random encounters in the overworld are also non-existent, and the running feature is just as sluggish and clunky as in the PS1 version. It's dumb that they didn't even bother fixing that. But, well, you can also save anywhere here, including inside the dungeons at any given time. Overall, these remasters are extremely mediocre. They could have done so much better. A translation more faithful to the Japanese script, no stupid censorship, improved interface and UI, stable frame rate, every single background and graphic fully upscaled and properly remastered, option to use the original cheesy English dub, Hero running better. They could have done all of that, but nope! There's just too many flaws with this, including several bugs and glitches I hope they fix soon with a patch or something. It's very ironic for me to say this, but I think it's just better if you stick to the original versions. Unless the speed up feature during combat is a huge plus for you, of course. If not, then yeah, forget about these lazy ass versions that feel more like middle of the road ports than full-fledged remasters.